The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. See here, do me a favor, if you can hear me, go ahead and raise your hand on the screen. Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. I understand that we're all busy, so hopefully this makes it a little bit more convenient for you to join our seminars or our webinars. And the first in this series, today we're going to go over feature coding in Trimble Access and Trimble Business Center. And let me go and fire up my presentation here. Okay, and our next webinar, just so you can take note, is going to be on processing GNSS data in Trimble Business Center, and that'll be on May 15th, and it'll go from 10 a.m. to 12 o'clock p.m. Okay, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and jump into our session for today on feature coding in Trimble Business Center and Access. And what I'm going to do is I'll probably save the questions for the end of the webinar, and this webinar will also be posted on our YouTube site. So if you have any questions, feel free to either post them on the YouTube site, ask questions at the end of this webinar, or also feel free to give us a call or send us an email. Okay, in this presentation, I'm going to cover the basic overview of what feature codes and attributes are. Also talk about collecting data with feature codes in the field. We're going to go over creating a basic feature code library, importing and processing our feature codes in Trimble Business Center, and also talk about how to export the data to various third-party formats. So the software and versions that we're going to be using in this presentation are the latest version of Trimble Access, which is version 2013.00. That was actually released last February. And for the opposite side, it's going to be in Trimble Business Center version 2.81. So if you don't have the latest versions of the software, I'd recommend just giving our office a call. We can check what version you're entitled to, and if you need to, we can get you updated. Okay, so first things first, what the heck are feature codes? Well, feature codes are what we use to describe the point, line, or area assets that we collect while surveying. A few good examples can include a point feature, which could be a tree, a line feature, which could be an oil pipeline, and a polygon or an area feature. In this example, we have a detention pond. And what are attributes? Well, attributes are the metadata that we can associate with our feature codes in order to give them some more descriptors or to enrich our feature code data. And we can use this for a GIS system or a general database to be able to query large amounts of data that we've collected out in the field based on not only the feature code but also their attributes, their conditions later on if we need to. So a few good examples could be if our feature code is tree, we can add attributes such as species, diameter at breast height, the drip line of the tree, or a photo. If it's a pipeline, we can add the attributes as type, size, condition, or segment ID. And if the code happens to be pond, we can add additional attributes such as the type of pond, the season that we were out measuring it, the level of the water line, and whatever the material might happen to be at the bank of that pond. So some of the benefits of feature coding include the ability to save time by creating features, attributes, and line work on the fly. So we're actually, in addition to collecting our surveying or our positional data or out mapping, we can add attributes and feature codes to the points that we collect. And we can also collect line work so we can connect the dots along alignments as we go. And that takes me to the next point. It's a good way to be able to QC your data, especially with line work as it's being collected, because I think we've all been in the field before and we've collected alignments. We look at it after we process the data in the office, and we have some zigzags where we inadvertently called say a edge of pavement a center line, or vice versa, and got those zigzags. So it's a good way to be able to look at the screen of your data collector and ensure that you're collecting the right data while you're in the field. And it's an incredibly easy way to create enriched survey and GIS data using the software and equipment that you may already own. So this goes all the way back to the days of Trimble Geomatics Office and Survey Controller, but now, of course, we've evolved, so we have more options, more functionality within Trimble Access, which is the latest field software, and Trimble Business Center, which is the latest office software. Okay? So, steps to creating feature codes and collecting them out in the field. The first step is we need to create a feature code library. Now, this can be done in the Feature Definition Manager, which is included with the utilities that are installed in Trimble Business Center. And if you have Trimble Business Center, it can be accessed by going to either File or Tools, depending on the interface that you're using, and opening up the Feature Definition Manager. Okay. So once we've created our feature code library, we can upload it to Trimble Access. We can do this via the Feature Definition Manager by going to File, Export, and choosing a device instead of a file location. Of course, we need our data collector plugged in, and we can send the feature code library that we create directly to the data collector. But we can also send the feature code library out to all of our data collectors within our organization remotely using the Trimble Connected Community and Access Sync. So if you want to learn more about that, visit our YouTube page at youtube.com/CSDSINC. And we have a nice little presentation on how to set up your own organization, how to use the TCC and Access Sync to start pushing data from the office to the field remotely and from the field to the office, saving your crew's trips and a lot of time managing data too. And you can also visit my.trimble.access.com to set up your own Access Sync organization. Okay. Next step is to collect and process our data. So once we've created our feature code library, we've sent it out to our data collectors, we'll then create a job within Trimble Access that includes our feature definition file, and the file extension for these are a .fxl, and we can collect features and attributes in the field. Now you see I have a couple screenshots of using the standard measure topo screen and entering our feature codes. Another cool function called measure codes here, and you can also measure features off the map screen, so you can be placed back into the map screen to be able to QC your data and make sure that you're collecting the correct alignments as you go. Okay. First, I'm going to give you a visual overview of how everything works, and I think this way works a little bit better so you can actually see what the processes of collecting data, you can see what the final product is, and then you can understand how to build your own feature code library. Okay, it's a little bit easier to visualize what's happening when you're creating feature codes and then to understand the assembly behind putting together your own feature definition library so you can understand what all the terms mean while you're building it. Okay? So again, I'm going to give you a visual overview of feature coding and how it works, and then we'll delve into the details of actually creating that feature code library and then processing our feature codes in Trimble Business Center. Okay, so we've all seen raw survey data, or most of us probably have, and we know it pretty much looks like this. We have quite a few points. We have all kinds of vectors, the green vectors from our total station observations, the blue vectors from our RTK, or our GPS observations, and a bunch of points. Well, this is the same data set with our feature codes processed. So all of this data was collected at the same time in the field, but you can see that we're saving a lot of time on the drafting side of things and the attributing side by including our feature codes. Some of these have line control codes, and we'll get into how that works. You can see these little tags here that indicate that we have media files or photos associated with our points. Okay, and if we take a closer look, we can see that we even have some scaled symbology. We have some trees. We have some more line control codes with arcs. We have our alignments and some of our area features as well as our points. Okay, so backing it up again, there's the raw survey data without the feature codes processed. And if we've collected feature codes along with those points, we can process the data in the office, and you can see that a lot of our line work has been done for us. And then again, looking a little bit closer, you can see that we've actually processed some symbols, and some of these symbols can actually be scaled to match the actual drip line of the trees, the size of the trunks, and some of the other attributes associated with their physical characteristics. Okay. Next, I'll talk about some of the methods of collecting data while we're out in the field, just so you can understand how efficient you or your crews can be while you're collecting data and the different methods that are available within Trimble Access. So we have three basic methods of collecting data. We have the basic point data collecting method using the code field within Trimble Access. We can also measure data from the map so we can kind of visualize what we're doing while we're collecting data. And we also have a really cool function that can speed things up quite a bit in the field called the measure codes method. So the first method, again, we're using Trimble Access version 2013.00. The first method is the standard measure topo method within Trimble Access. To do this, I can simply click on measure, go into measure topo, and when I'm measuring my topo point, I can tap in the code field. When I do that, if I have a feature code library that I've uploaded to my data collector and a list of feature codes in there, the features that I've created in my feature code library will be listed in alphabetical order based on the first letter that I type in. So I don't have to search through a huge list of features to find exactly what I'm trying to call this point that I'm collecting. Okay. So measuring from the map screen is pretty similar, except for we can click on the map screen button and we'll be placed in the map screen so we can visualize or display the data that we've been collecting, and then we can simply hit measure. When we do that, we're placed into the standard measure topo window, where again we can enter the feature code that we've measured. And once we store that point, it's going to throw us right back into the map screen so that we can, again, visualize and QC the data that we're collecting as we go. And you can see here that we have an alignment, so it's always nice to make sure that you're connecting the correct points to each other while you're going along so you don't get those inadvertent zigzags that I was talking about. Okay? So two methods so far. The first was a standard measure topo into your code. Second is measuring from the map screen here. So you just jump into your map screen, you hit measure, it'll throw you back into the map screen when you're done. Okay. And if you happen to have attributes associated with your points or with your feature code, you'll see an attribute button become available on the bottom of the window of your data collector after that feature code has been entered. So in this case, I entered a tree as a feature code. This attribute button will pop up indicating that there are attributes available that we've created associated with this feature code. If I click on the attributes button, it'll allow me to enter the attributes that I've created in the feature definition manager. So in this case, I have a tag ID if the trees are all ID'd or serialized. I can have the species of the tree. If I have another species, I can create a drop-down menu attribute called Other, and I can key in the other species. I can add a photo attribute, and I can also add a drip line, which is an attribute that's going to actually scale the tree symbol to match the actual radius of the drip line. So you can see here that I've also added a photo attribute. And when I do have a photo attribute added, I'll see the little photo attribute icon, which is going to activate the camera on my data collector. If I click there, it'll open up the camera, and this is only available on the TSE3 or the tablet. If you happen to be using an S6 that has vision technology or a VX, which means the total station has a camera built in, you'll see another icon too that has a total station with a camera behind it. You take photos from the station itself. But the process for taking a photo with your TSE3 is to basically tap on the little camera icon. The camera will pop up. You basically point to the object of interest. You hit the Enter key or the Center key on your data collector to actually capture the photo. And then you'll hit the OK button twice. What this will do is it'll close the camera, and it'll throw you back into the media file dialog within Access. So this is really cool because, again, the process, if you have a photo attribute, you take the photo, you hit Enter to capture the photo, you hit OK twice, and while you're still collecting the point, it'll throw you into the media file dialog. And this will allow you to determine how you're going to link that point or what you're going to, or that photo, and what you're going to link that photo to. So some of your options include previous point. You can choose to link it to the next point that you collect, or you can actually specify a point number if there's another point that you've collected previously and you want to associate the photo that you just took with that point. And later on, we're going to see how these photos actually come into Trimble Business Center and how we can use those in other programs. Okay, so the third method of collecting feature codes, and to me this is probably the most efficient method as far as collecting them quickly. It's almost a GIS method of collecting survey data. Is to use the measure codes method. Now, if you have Survey Controller or Trimble Access, you might have seen this option on your data collector before under the measure menu. And if you haven't used it yet, it's actually quite cool. So what you'll do first is you'll go into Measure, and instead of choosing Measure Topo, you'll choose Measure Codes. So essentially what this allows you to do is to create groups of common codes, for example, roads or utilities, vegetation, and collect each feature with a simple tap of the code. So you can simply tap any of these features, and it'll start recording a point for any of those codes. You can see that your category list is a simple drop-down menu, so you can create multiple categories with up to 9 codes per category. Okay, you can quickly toggle between these categories or these groups, and you can collect data as fast as you can hit the Enter key or tap any of these codes that you've inserted. And there are a couple other really nice options that we can do. Also, you can create these code groups. So if I go back and look at my different groups that I've created here on this data collector, you can also create these groups within the Feature Definition Manager that we're going to do later. And you can also create these groups on the fly when you're in the field. So if you have a feature definition list, you can simply hit Add Group. You can type in the group name. You're going to get a blank set of tiles here. And you can either hold down and press and add the feature code that you'd like to add to that tile. And you can also add feature codes that you might not have in your list. So you don't have to use all the feature codes that you've created. You can add additional codes if you forgot to add something that you're actually going to collect in the field. So this is one of the coolest parts of the Measure Codes feature. It's the automatic template pickup. So I know a lot of you might be doing alignments. We're going out and collecting, as-built roads. We're doing some topo maps. You could be doing some utility stuff with pipelines that might be in alignment with each other. So for that, we can use what's called the automatic template pickup. And to access that option, you can click on the additional options arrow within Trimble Access. And you have to be in the Measure Codes function. If you tap on Options, it'll take you into the Measure Codes options. And in this case, we can choose Template Pickup. You can choose a direction that you want to pick it up, and I'll explain how this works in a minute. But you can see you have the option for zigzag, you have right to left, left to right, or you can turn that off. And then, of course, you want to choose the number of elements that you have within that template in order for this to work correctly. So if I go back to my previous screen, you can see that I'm collecting a pretty basic road alignment. I've created a group called Roads. And I have 5 elements here. I have EP1, Edge of Travelway 1. I have my center line, Edge of Travelway 2, and EP2. Okay, so 5 elements that I'm collecting along this alignment. Under the Template Pickup option, I'm going to choose Zigzag because I want to be able to cross the road, move up to the next station, yet be on the same element, and then cross the road again, going in a zigzag pattern in order to collect these templates. So when I choose those options and I get back into the Measure Codes function, I can simply hit the Enter key, and it's going to record EP1. Hit the Enter key again, Edge of Travelway 1. It's automatically going to move to center line. Automatically going to move to ETW after I've collected the center line. Then to EP2. What I can do, I can just move up station, and it's going to stay on EP2 for the next feature that I record. So I can collect EP2, Then I can cross over to my edge of travel way 2, back to my center line, etc. So you see that this can really speed up the way that you pick up these feature codes and collect these alignments in the field. Okay? And then, of course, you can review the template that you're picking up if you created line features that are connecting together or line control codes by simply tapping on the map button to ensure that you're collecting everything in the right sequence. And like I've already mentioned a couple times, this is nice because I think we've all experienced inadvertently collecting features, and say we call the center line an EP, so we're going to see these zigzags when we get back into the office. So this really allows you or your crews to be able to quality control the data prior to bringing it in. If they happen to misname one of the features of the points that they've collected, they can always go back into the point manager within Access and simply go into Edit and edit the feature code for that point, and it will dynamically change or correct that feature code. Okay, so quick review. The 3 methods of collecting data are going to be the simple measure topo screen where we can enter a code. We have the map screen that we can simply hit measure on. That'll throw us into that measure topo window where we can enter our feature code. We can also enter attributes. We can take photo attributes, associate them with our points, and then we can use this really cool and efficient measure codes function that allows us to measure codes and templates. Okay, one thing I wanted to mention as well within the measure codes function is that each one of these tiles correspond to the number keys on your data collector. So you can actually activate them without even touching the touch screen on your TSC3 or TSC2. You can simply hit the numeric key. So in this case, a crop would be 1, fruit would be 2, irrigation would be 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. So again, that's even more of an efficient way. And even if you're not going in that zigzag or template pickup order, you can simply keep this up, and if you're collecting a tree and then you want to collect an orchard or some ivy, simply tap on those numeric keys or use the touch screen. Okay. So next, I'm going to go and create a very basic feature code library using Trimble's Feature Definition Manager. So again, this is a utility that's included with Trimble Business Center, and if you download and install it, TBC is available, the very basic version for free off Trimble's website. But then to use the Feature Definition Manager and to process your features, you're going to need to update to either TBC Standard or TBC Advanced. Okay. And again, you can use the Feature Definition Manager to create point, line, and polygon features with attributes in the field. And again, this is allowing you to verify your line work and process the data when you get back into the office. Okay, so some of the elements that we're able to create within the Feature Definition Manager, you can create point, line, and area or polygon features, and you can also add symbols, categories, and layer assignments so you can manage this data either within TBC or within your third-party CAD software. Okay, you could also add line styles to either your areas or your line features as well. So the thickness of the line, the pattern of the line, and so forth. Okay, you can add attributes such as notes, timestamps, photos, or file attachments. And I'm going to show you this one cool attribute that I mentioned earlier. It's the dynamic attribute that allows you to scale your symbology based on the attribute value. For example, a tree's drip line, it can scale that to a real-world value. Okay, and another cool function are the line control codes. So this is basically creating a line feature and then controlling the way that our points are connecting to each other. So if we have a continuous segment of line that we want to stop at one point and then continue at another point later on down the line, we can create line control codes that allow us to stop that feature from connecting to the last feature and then start at a later point. There are also some other line control codes that allow us to create arcs, and I'm going to show you a visual example of how those work prior to actually building those in the Feature Definition Manager. Okay, so here are some samples of our point and line features. We have a point feature here, a tree, and a line feature that could be a road center line. And these are all the features that we're going to create within the Feature Definition Manager. Here's what an area feature looks like. So for example, it could be a parking lot, a building, any type of structure, some type of body of water. Okay. And we've also have the line control code. So this is another type of feature that we can create within the Feature Definition Manager. And the way that we apply these line control codes when lines start and when lines stop within the field is we simply enter a space between the feature code and key in the line control code. So for example, if we created a line feature called centerline, the code would be CL. And for that centerline to start, we can say CLST. And this is only if we want it to end at the previous feature that we collected called centerline and begin at another point. And if we want a centerline or any other line feature to end, we can simply enter that feature code. In this case, it's CL, give it a space, and then enter the line control code that we've created of end, and that'll end that series of points from connecting to each other and creating those lines. So here's a good way to visualize how those line control codes work with your feature codes. Okay, so in this case, we have a CL here, and we see that we've entered the CL with a space and an end in the field, and that ends that line sequence from joining together. And then we can create another CL, and it's going to go ahead and resume connecting those dots together to create our line work dynamically. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, we can do this in a couple of ways by either using the end line control code or the start line control code on the next point that we want to end the previous and start the next, and you can see how that works here. So in this case, I've ended my center line at point 2, and I've resumed connecting them at point 3 and 4. Or if I simply hit start again, CLST at point 3, it's going to disconnect the previous point or the joining of the previous point, and it's going to resume collecting as I move forward. So again, a couple of ways of using the start and the end features on our line control codes. We've got point 1 and point 2 connected. It ends that connecting sequence at point 2 because I put the end control code in there. And then it's going to resume connecting those dots at points 3 and 4. And then again, another method to do it is by simply hitting CLST or start at point 3. And that's not going to connect point 3 to the previous point, but it's going to start connecting the dots from point 3 on. Okay. A couple other line control codes that we're going to create. We have the ability to create arcs, and these are fairly simple arc figures within Access and Trimble Business Center. Okay, so this is a tangential arc. The two options that we have are tangential arcs and non-tangential arcs. So the way to key in your points to start a tangential arc would be start it, say on our second point here. This is going to create the end tangent with the previous point that has the same feature code. Okay, so at point 2, that's center line with a space and an STA for start tangential arc. Okay, it's going to create a tangent between the previous point with the same feature code. Okay, so you have point 3, and then I have my exit tangent here, and I basically designate that by giving it the CL feature code, which is connecting these dots, and the end tangential arc. And of course, I need another point to create that out tangent, so I need a point with the same feature code to create that tangent there. Okay, so that's a tangential arc. End tangent, need the 2 points. Point 2 basically designates the last point of the tangent into my arc, and then point 4 and point 5 are going to create my exit tangent. Okay, this is a non-tangential arc where I simply have 3 points that are creating this arc. If I have my EP, my start non-tangential arc, another point with the same feature code, it's basically going to do a best fit, and that's going to be the center point for the arc. And then point 4 is going to be my EP and non-tangential arc, and that's a fairly easy, straightforward arc to create. Okay, so again, tangential arc and non-tangential arc. And finally, we can make a line control code close to create an area-like figure with the close control code. So we don't always have to create area features like the lot or the building that I showed you earlier. We can simply create a line control code called a close. And you can see what's happening here. I went out and I collected a lot line there, lot line here, lot line on point 6. And when I choose the line control code of close, after my final lot line, it's going to connect the very last point that I collected with that feature code to the very first point with that feature code. So instead of creating areas, you can have the flexibility of creating line features and then using that close line control code in order to close out that figure and give you a closed area. Okay, so next I'm going to jump into a live demonstration. Now that you can kind of visualize or understand some of the feature codes, the line control codes and what they do, hopefully it'll make more sense when we create a basic feature code library using the feature definition manager. And again, to open it up, it's simply under Tools, Feature Definition Manager in TBC. Okay. So I'm going to jump into TBC. So there are a couple different ways that you can open this. Since TBC is changing the interface, in the classic interface, you can go to Tools and open up your Feature Definition Manager. And in the new ribbon interface, you can go to File, Tools, and your Feature Definition Manager is available from this menu. Okay, I'm going to toggle back to the classic. I'm going to go to Tools and Feature Definition Manager. Okay, so the first step to creating a feature code library is to basically create a new file. You can see that there are very few options to choose from here, and it's a very easy utility to use. So I'm going to go ahead and click File, a new file. Okay. And you can see that the first thing we can do is we can enter our feature definition file properties. So if we wanted to give it a description and the basic properties of our feature definition manager, we can throw those in there now into those fields. I'm going to go ahead and skip that for now so we can jump into creating some of our features. So if we jump into Edit and New, we can see the different objects that we can actually create. We can create a new category, so this allows us to categorize the different feature sets that we're creating. So if it's transportation, utilities, vegetation, and so forth, we can simply organize these feature code groups that we create in those categories. We can create a new point feature definition. So if it's going to be something like a valve, a meter, a tree, something that's a stationary point feature, we can create it there. We can create a new line feature. So this is going to be one of those lines that's going to automatically connect with the previous feature. Okay. And we've also got the new Polygon feature definition, which is simply an area feature. It's going to close out to the first point with the same feature code and give you an area figure. Okay. We've also got the ability to create new line control codes. So those line control codes are where we can command the features to create arcs, to start and to stop, and even to close if we want them to. And this is where we can create the new groups. So this is where we can add 9 features to each group for the measure codes function in Trimble Access. So it could be a lot easier to do it here in the office opposed to having to use the 4.5-inch screen in the field to create our groups from. Okay. And you can see that these other options are grayed out. Of course, we need to create a new point before we can create an attribute or a point symbol or a line style. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new point feature. And the reason why I'm going to do that first is because you can dynamically create new categories as you're creating any of these feature codes. So I'll say new point feature. And I'm going to keep this simple. I'll call it a tree. So the name is the actual name of that feature code, and the code is what they'll key in the field. So we something as simple as TR for tree, but in this case I'll just go ahead and give it a full tree as a name. And again, like I mentioned, you can enter the category dynamically and it can be created automatically from this window without having to go to Edit, New Category, and create all of your categories beforehand. So I'll just call this Landscape. Okay. We have all of our layering control here, so we can add a new layer if we'd like to. So this is so we can organize it when it's a DXF file, or when it's in TBC, we can isolate layers if we want to. So I'll call this layer Vegetation. I'll give it a nice green color. Okay. And I'll hit OK there. And then we can also change our colors by the specific layers as well. And I'll just keep it on layer instead of defining that that tree feature as a specific color. If I wanted to, I can always change that and make it a unique color as well, instead of being layer dependent. Okay. And this option here, including surface, allows me to, when I'm using any of my surface functions within TBC, it will automatically include that feature within a surface that I create. So for that tree, I'll go ahead and hit OK. And you can see that it's created the landscape category for me automatically, instead of me having to go to Edit, New, and New Category. And it created that tree point feature. Okay. So the next thing I can do is I can start adding attributes or those additional descriptors to my point feature. To do that, I can simply select the tree, go to Edit and New Attribute. Or I can right-click anywhere within the Attributes field, click New Attributes, and you can see that I have a pretty wide range of attributes that I can add. So I can add a number attribute, which is basically the ability to enter a number, and so it's only numeric, it's not alphanumeric. I can add an integer attribute. I can add a text attribute, and that's alphanumeric, so allow for both alphabetical characters and numeric characters. I can add a date, where I can give it a timestamp or manually enter a date, a time attribute. This one's pretty common, a list attribute, or also referred to as a domain, for having a drop-down menu within that point attribute. I can attach a file, so if I have a file on my data collector, say a spreadsheet or anything basically, I can add that file to this feature as an attribute. And then that photo attribute, if I have a data collector that has a built-in camera, that's when that little photo icon will appear at the bottom of the screen when I tap on attributes, and I can add a photo that I capture to that point and link it there, and it'll be available to view when I download that data too. Okay. So the first thing I'll do is I will add a text attribute, and this one I'll call and I can call this tree ID. Give it a brief description so I know what it means. Okay. I also have conditional entry modes. So if you have your crews going down the field and they're required to enter an asset tag, you don't want them to record something without entering something or an asset ID. You can make it required, make it optional, or you can prevent them from entering anything in the field and make it for office use only. Say optional here. You can enter a default value. So say all of your tree IDs have a prefix, and you don't want the crews to have to enter that prefix every time. So you can say something like this, and that will be the default value. And then you have a maximum length here. So if you have a descriptor field within your attributes and you don't want somebody typing in their life story, you can say, okay, well, I know all of my tree IDs are limited to 20 characters, so you can give it a maximum length there. Okay? So that's a simple text attribute. Another common attribute, like I mentioned, is a list attribute. So this is where we can actually create a drop-down list with predefined attribute values. And what's really nice about this is that if we're ever running queries later on the data that we've collected, we can ensure that somebody didn't manually type something in and inadvertently mistype something or misspell something, and that we're going to be able to run a query on data that has consistent entries because we've created them in a menu. So in this case, I'll just say species. Okay. And I'll go ahead and add a couple different options. Say oak. Say add pine. Add palm. I can say add other as well. So if it's a species that somebody can't identify, you can say other. Or if it's not on the list, it's probably a better way to put it. If we didn't happen to include the species on the list, we can add an other field here. And with that other field, we can add a text field called something like, make sure we don't give them too much space to fill up that attribute field. Say maximum length is 20. And then that way they can key in something if it doesn't happen to be on our list. Okay. And finally, I'll go and add a, actually before that, I'm going to add another numeric attribute. This is pretty cool. This one's going to be the tree drip line. Okay. I'm going to say measure in the description here. Okay, my default value is going to be a foot. And I'll have, say, 2 decimal places. So that tree drip line, the reason why I'm adding that is because that's a pretty common attribute that people add to tree descriptors. And also you can see how I can use that tree drip line attribute later on in order to actually scale the size of that tree symbol within TBC, and then I can export out as a DXF or DWG later on. But that's going to become a dynamic attribute to be used within my symbology. Okay. So finally, I'll add a photo attribute. I'll call this tree photo. And you don't have to have these descriptions. They're always helpful if you have something that might be a a numeric attribute value or numeric attribute name to help describe what that is. If you're working off of a code list that you've created a while back, you can always enter a description there, but it's not mandatory. Okay, so that's basically how we can create a tree feature code or a point feature code. We can add some attributes. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a tree symbol so that when I actually draft this or process these feature codes, I'll actually see a tree symbol. And again, I'm going to use that tree drip line attribute value to be able to scale the size of that tree and how it appears on my map. So I can simply right-click within any of these fields, actually. I can click on New Symbol. Okay, I'll call the symbol a tree. Give it a description. It's not mandatory. Under my symbol, you can see that I only have the cross symbol here for my points, but I can always click on Import Symbols. Okay, and I can choose the file. By default, it's going to take you to the Feature Definition Manager in the Point Editor directory. I can choose my symbols library here. And if I want to, you can see under File Types, I can also choose a DWG or a DXF file that might contain other symbols that I might already be using within my other CAD software. But in this case, I'm just going to use my TGO symbol library. Click Open. And from here, I can either add individual symbols I already have. In this case, I'll add a tree. Or I can basically add everything by clicking on these double brackets and have all of them available when I create other symbols for other features. I'll go and hit OK. And from here, I'll select my tree. Okay. And next, I'm going to go ahead and I can choose my rotation. So this could be another dynamic attribute. You can see that I can either have a fixed value or an attribute. And this would be one of the dynamic attributes, a numeric attribute that I can add in there. But for my symbol size and scaling, if I didn't have this tree drip line, I'd have to use a fixed value. But since I have it, I can say it's going to be based on an attribute, and I can choose the tree drip line as my attribute name. And then my dimensioning can be based on the grounds, which kind of makes sense because that's where I'm going to measure it from, and it's going to give me a scaled size or to the sheet that I'm plotting on. I'll go ahead and hit OK, and you can see here that I have my tree symbol, and my default value for that drip line is 1 foot in the radius. Okay, so as we change that tree drip line attribute, that's going to scale the size of that symbol when we process these feature codes in Trimble Business Center. Okay, so I'll go ahead and save that as we go. I'll call this one. Okay, so next I'm going to go ahead and create a line feature. And I can do that in a couple different ways. I can go to Edit, New, and New Line Feature Definition. Or I can click on the top of my screen here and choose the New Line Feature Definition icon. Okay, and the difference between a point feature code and a line feature code is that the line feature codes are going to connect the dots or connect the points that have the same feature code name if they are defined as a line feature code. Okay? So I'm going to call this one something pretty common. I'll just call it a center line for a road. I'll give it a code of CL. Remember, the center line is the feature's name, and the code is what the crews or yourself might be entering in the field under the code field while you're measuring a point. I'm going to go ahead and create a new category called Transportation, and I can throw this onto a new layer called Transportation. Okay. And the color, you can do it by layer. You can make a solid or a dashed line style, and we can actually change this line style within our line and symbol editor after we've created a feature. Okay. And this we're going to have a solid or dashed line in the field. And again, we have the option to add those lines into our surfaces as well. So for break lines, if we need them, that's a pretty handy utility to have. Okay. Go and hit OK. And here, we can begin to add attributes, just like we did with our point feature. So this time I'll say new attribute, say date collected, and the file. And we can also add, say, a basic text option here. Call this comments. And again, I want to keep the maximum length something reasonable, just so somebody doesn't type in a novel when they're describing what they're collecting in the field. Okay. If you're a little bit more sophisticated with the field side of things, you can always record a voice memo and add that in as a file here. And that's going to be similar to the photo field, except it's going to allow you to browse your data collector and choose that voice memo that you recorded on the data collector. Okay. So that's creating our line feature. Now for our lines and symbols, it's going to be the same process as adding our point symbol, except for we're going to choose new line. Call this center line. Okay. And we can import our line styles here, just like we did with our point feature. I'm going to choose a center line, or I can import everything so they're available when I create another line feature. Okay. And I'll make this a nice bright yellow center line. Okay, you can scale it as well if you want to. So it's the thickness of the line. And you can either do the offset unit to the sheet or to ground. This is pretty neat too. You can give yourself a fixed offset if you'd like to for any of these line features. So if you have a fixed distance to the center line from, say, a fog line, you can enter a horizontal and even a vertical offset if you want to. Okay, so there's my center line there. Quick little preview of what it will look like when I process my data. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and finish this off by adding a new Polygon feature. And again, this is just a closed area that's going to connect the first point with the feature code to the very last point with the same feature code and close it up. So I'll call this one a pond. And pond, be pretty easy in the field. Change my category to, say, water. Okay, layer, same thing here. Okay, the borderline style, you can either have solid or you can choose a different style from just like creating the line style from the lines and symbols field. Okay, you can have a scale too for the thickness, the color, and then you can have the field border line style here as well. Okay, so this is just whether or not it's going to be solid or dashed on the data collector while you're collecting those feature codes. Okay. This is also a field that I forgot to mention here. It's the fill transparency. So it's pretty nice. If you choose a specific color for that area or that polygon feature, say one of my waters be aquamarine, the fill transparency will actually give you some transparency over that area when the color is filled in. So you can either have it be solid by saying no transparency, or 50% transparency by throwing 50 in there. Okay, go and hit OK to that. And you can see the transparency here, 50%. It's not fully aquamarine. Okay, and that's just a preview of what that area feature, that polygon feature is going to look like once it's created. Okay, and here we can simply add additional attributes, just like we did with our point and our line features. Okay, so that's how easy it is to create point, line, and area features within our feature definition manager. Like I said, the categories will be created dynamically. Okay, we can create the point, line, and area features, add as many attributes as we like, and that's pretty much it. So next thing I'll do, go and save this as I go, and I'm going to go ahead and start creating some line control codes. So we're able to kind of visualize how those work with the start line, end lines, some of our arcs, and then also closing in our line features. And to do that, we can either go to Edit, New, and New Line Control Code, or we can simply click on the New Line Control Code button on the top of the screen there. Okay, and you can see that we have a list of all the line control codes that we have available. So start, end, join to a specific point, so one point to another. Ignores any joining operation, so if we want to ignore joining and just have point features. You can close a line, so this is where you can convert a line feature almost to a polygon feature by clicking or adding close to the end of the feature code. You can start the tangential arc and the tangential arc, then non-tangential options are there. So I'll do something simple. I'll give myself a start sequence. I'll call this one start line. I'll say previous join sequence. Those are for my own notes there. And then the code could be something as simple as ST for start. So that way the field crews or yourself don't have to enter the feature code itself and then a space and then start line. They can simply enter an ST after the feature code. Hit OK there. Go and create another one. This one, end line. Please say end there and make sure I choose the correct action for that line control code. Okay, I'll create another one here. This one will be the closed line to create the polygon feature out of just our line control or our line feature codes. So I'll just call this close, and so forth. And it's going to be the same for our line control codes. We can start a tangential arc. So again, you click the first point. The second point is going to be your in tangent. Then you're going to have the arc fit between the in tangent and the out tangent as you go. And if you go back and you review this presentation, you'll be able to visualize again what the difference between the tangential arc and the non-tangential arc by checking out those previous slides. Okay. All right, so once I've created my feature codes, and I have a couple control codes in there if I want to for the lines, I can start creating those groups. And these groups are specifically for that measure codes function within Trimble Access or Survey Controller, where you can have those 9 tiles going across the screen with specific feature codes, and you can create different groups of those codes. So if I go to Edit, New, and New Group, I can create that new group. I can also simply hit the New Group button on the top of the screen. Okay, and you can see that I'm going to have all the codes that I've created here, or the point codes, and the line codes, and also the control codes I can add to this list. And I'm limited to 9 because, remember, I only have the 9 tiles on the screen on my data collector. Okay, so I'm simply going to call this new group presentation group. I can start adding these as I go. Okay. So if I save this, I'll go and close it up, and I'm going to look at a pretty comprehensive. This isn't the one I wanted. I wanted a different one. There we go. This one has a few more codes. So you can see here that we have quite a few feature codes, quite a few categories. We have our point features and our line features. We have the structures. You can have your survey control codes with the iron pipe, nail, survey control, your different symbology if you want to help distinguish your points when you process the feature codes. Your utilities, some vegetation here. And then we also have all the groups that we've created. And you can see that these groups are limited to those 9 tiles that you have on your data collector. So just a quick note within the measure codes function, if you jump into those options on the data collector, you're not only limited to those 9 when you're doing the template pickup, you can actually combine 3 different groups to have a total of up to 27 features within that profile or that template that you're picking up. So that's just a little side note. Okay. So with that said, we've gone over the methods of, or the basic concepts behind the feature codes, the line features, the area features, adding your attributes, the method of collecting that data in the field just so you can understand how the data is collected, and then how to build this feature definition manager just so you can visualize how everything's coming together prior to building these feature code libraries. So one other thing I wanted to mention is that even if you don't create a photo attribute within one of your feature codes, so if you didn't happen to create a feature or a photo attribute, and you're using a TSC3 that has a built-in camera, there's a method that you can actually use, a shortcut to actually link photos to your points pretty much on the fly in the field. So what you can do is you can hit the function key and the 1 key, and you see the function key is kind of the secondary set of options that you have on your hard keys in the field. Under the one, or on top of the 1 key, we have the camera icon. So if you hit function 1 and you hit enter to take your photo, once you've captured it, you can hit OK twice, and that'll take you into the media file dialog that allows you to associate that photo with a point. So again, if we didn't create a photo attribute on top of one of our points. It's function 1. You capture the photo by hitting enter after you've aimed at the object of interest. You hit OK twice. That'll take you into the media file dialog. And again, you can associate that photo with either a previous point, the next point that you're going to record and store, or a specific point name. Okay. So next, I'm going to go over how to process the data once we've imported it into TBC. So the basic steps for doing this is to create or open up an existing project. You want to ensure that you've selected the feature definition file or the .fxl that we've created in that feature definition manager within our project settings. Then we want to import our Trimble Access job file, and from the survey menu, we'll click survey and we'll say process feature codes. Okay. So again, I'm using a Trimble Business Center version 2.81, and in this project, I've already imported some field data. Okay, so this is a couple of job files, and this is the same project file that we saw at the beginning of this presentation where we have tons of survey data. What I can do next is I can open up my view filter, and just to kind of hide a lot of this noise that we see from the point names, I can uncheck show point labels. Okay. I can also uncheck the RTK vectors and the total station observations. And you can see here that I have a bunch of media files, and those are indicated by the little media file icon within my data set. Okay, so that's automatically imported and associated with your points prior to even processing your feature code data. Okay, so what I'll do next, I've imported my project data, and I'm going to go ahead and ensure that I have that feature code file or that FXL file that I created with the feature definition manager associated with this project. To do that, I'll go to Project, Project Settings, and under the feature code processing options, I'll select that feature code library that I created for this project. Okay. I can have decimal precisions, and this is if I include those attributes that are going to scale or rotate some of my symbols. And then I can also have it create a new line string with it when an attribute changes. So this gives me the option to basically create new line strings or line segments if the attribute happens to change along that same line feature code that I'm creating. Okay. So once I've selected the correct feature code library, I'll go ahead and go to Survey and Process Feature Codes. Okay. So you see I have this point or this job file that I've imported in called RTD Topo. And before I hit Process Sources, I have to actually select one of the files to process, because if I had multiple files in here and I didn't want to process all of them, I can do one at a time just to verify that everything is being processed correctly. Okay. I'll go ahead and hit Process Sources. And this is really nice too. What TBC provides is a feature code processing report. And that will allow you to see which feature codes might not have been recognized or keyed in incorrectly, how many feature codes have been processed, and some additional information about your feature code processing. I'll go ahead and hit yes here. Take a look at that report quickly. And you can see your process time, the count for unknown features, okay, problematic attribute count. So this is just a quick way to QC all of your points and all the features once you've processed them. Okay. And again, if you take a look at the data that I've imported, I created this feature code library that has these line control codes that are connecting these dots. Also these tree symbols here. And some of the arc functions, the tangential arc, non-tangential. So we can create those arcs in the field. Some other tree symbols. some photo stations. If we have a VX or an S6 with vision, you can see where we've taken some panoramic photos. Okay. Now, like I mentioned earlier, when we import any data, and it doesn't have to be processed, but if they have linked photos, we're going to see these media file icons. Okay. And the way that we can visualize these is if we select the data, we can simply right-click, and we can open the image file if we'd like to, and see what that photo was. Okay, let me find another good one here. Right-click, open image. These were some pretty low-resolution images that were captured in the field. You might have some higher-res ones. There we go. That's a nice, clear one from the TSC3. Okay. And if we want to, within Trimble Business Center, we can always jump into our Project Explorer, which is under View, Project Explorer. And when we expand our point list, we can always select a point, and we can assign media files after the fact. So if we used a separate camera, or we want to assign any type of file type to our survey data, we can do that by simply opening up the Project Explorer and assigning or removing media files. Okay. So, and for the images, you actually need to first import them into TBC by simply dragging and dropping them in to your project, and then they will become available as media files to be assigned. Okay. So finally what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and export this data to a third-party software. And to do that, I can select all by hitting Control-A. And I'm going to go to File and Export, or I can also hit the Export button at the top of the screen here. Now you can look at the different file formats that we have to choose from. And for these, we'd probably choose either the CAD file format, because we can export our data as a DXF, DWG, or even out to SketchUp. Or we can choose a GIS format. That could be a KML, KMZ for Google Earth, a geodatabase, or a shapefile. And if we wanted to quickly view this data in Google Earth, we can also simply hit the Google Earth button up here, and it'll actually export all that line work to a Google Earth file and pull up Google Earth automatically. Okay. So what we can do is we can choose a shapefile exporter in this case. It's going to give your file the same name as your project that you created. Make sure that all of your settings are correct here as far as your exporting goes. If they're in feet or meters, you want to make sure that that's correct. Okay. And you can choose a specific location or where you want those or want that shapefile to be created. And then finally, don't forget to hit the export button. Okay. And I think I have some transformation errors just because of different coordinate systems that I've switched around over creating this data set for this presentation. Okay. It could even be a units issue as well. Okay. So that's basically the export process is file export, choose your export format, choose the correct directory that you'd like to output it to, and save it. Okay, so that's pretty much the whole process. Again, we started off by defining what the point, line, and area features are and how they work. And the process of collecting the data on the field. So you have the standard measure topo feature where you can enter the code. You have the map screen that you can measure points from. You also have the area features, or I'm sorry, the measure code features that you can use to simply tap on the screen or do a template pickup as you go in the field. Okay. And just to round things out again, the software and the versions that we use in this presentation that I recommend getting upgraded to is Trimble Access version 2013.00, and that's our field data collection software. We also have a Trimble Business Center version 2.81, and that is our office processing software. So if you want to keep your software up to date, like I mentioned, get a hold of Cole Moon at our office here in Sacramento. His number is 916-344-0232, and you can also email him at support@csdsinc.com. What he'll need is the serial numbers from your data collectors and your office software. He can help you to get those if you need him to, and then he'll tell you where you're at with your support. And if you have multiple devices or software installations that might have different support cutoff dates as far as their software maintenance goes, we can always prorate everything to fall on the same day. So you can update and keep everything up to date the same day on an annual basis. Some of the hardware that I used to put together this presentation was the Trimble TSC3 with Trimble Access software. So you can see the data collector here. The Trimble VX and the S6 robotic total stations for some of the conventional stuff, and also the Trimble R10 GNSS receiver for the GPS data that was collected. And if you have more questions or you'd like an in-office demo on feature codes and how they work, you can contact any of our CSDS reps. In the Sacramento area, we have myself, Tom Cardenas. In the Bay Area, we have Ben Scholes. In San Francisco, the North Coast, and the Redding area, we have Tyler Williams. And then Fresno and most of the Central Valley, we have Chris Barden. So you'll be able to watch this video again, and we encourage you to share it with anyone else within your organization or outside of your organization that might be interested in creating feature codes, utilizing them in the field to be a little bit more efficient to QC their data. And this video and other training videos are available at youtube.com/CSDSINC. And we have tons of educational videos there on not only surveying but scanning and some of our different layout solutions. And if you ever have any support issues that require sharing the resolution with any of your associates or within your organization, please let us know, and we can always put together videos for you that will be available at this YouTube channel. And you can always watch them over and over again for your future reference. All right, well, thank you for joining us today. I hope you got something out of this. Hope you learned how to use the feature codes and how to process them. And you can see the potential for being a little bit more efficient out in the field and creating a much more rich data set for a GIS database and for general data collection. Again, like I mentioned, our next webinar is going to be processing GNSS data in Trimble Business Center, and that will be on May 15th from 10 a.m. to noon. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And like I mentioned, if you have any questions, you can feel free to email your local rep. You can give us a call, and you can also post questions to our YouTube page. And that way, if you have questions, maybe somebody else will have a similar question, and we can get those addressed on the site. Again, I'd like to thank everyone again for joining us, and this will end the webinar for today. Thanks.